Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Curious Competitor podcast with me, your host, current New Jersey Devils defenseman, Connor Carrick. I'm very excited to announce our guest today, ex-teammate of mine as a Toronto Maple Leaf, Dominic Moore. He's an NHL veteran of nearly 1,000 NHL games when you include his playoff resume. He's a Bill Masterton Memorial Trophy winner, which best exemplifies qualities of perseverance, sportsmanship, and dedication to hockey. He has played for an extensive list of teams, always proving himself to be a playoff asset throughout his career, which led to many of his moves. The list includes the New York Rangers, the Pittsburgh Penguins, the Minnesota Wild, the Toronto Maple Leafs, the Buffalo Sabres, the Florida Panthers, the Montreal Canadiens, the Tampa Bay Lightning, the San Jose Sharks, the New York Rangers again, the Boston Bruins, and the Toronto Maple Leafs again. Finally ending his career over in Switzerland, which we talk about at the end of this podcast, with the ZSC Lions. He is also the creator of Smashfest, an annual ping-pong themed charity event hosted it's usually at the Steam Whistle Brewery. I was able to go one year in Toronto before we played together. And he is also a graduate from Harvard, which not a big deal. So he's clearly an exceptional individual, a relentless competitor, a teammate that I relied on to learn a lot from. We spent more time, I think, in his last year in the NHL and during my time with the Leafs, bag skating together, but a lot to learn from Dominic Moore. He's an incredible individual with an incredible career, and he's on the other side of it now and is able to talk about it from a place of hindsight. So thank you for joining us today, wherever you are in the world. Let's do this. Dom, first off, thanks for deciding to come on, because for whatever reason, the hockey guys tend to be a little stubborn and hard to get on. You've moved on. You had a career of, nearly 1,000 NHL games when you add up all the playoff games, all the trades, all the, ups and downs of your career. I had a ton of respect when you first signed with the Leafs. I remember I was super excited just because I'd always appreciated your game. Like I think just particularly I remember in your years with the Rangers where you guys had some really deep runs. Like I just remember watching I can't remember if I was a young pro or still just a draft pick at that time, but like elite detail, cutting off the top, like a strong ability to knock pucks down, relentless down the ice. And you did such a good job of it. And I knew the story of, how you were, the Bill Masterton Memorial Trophy winner. I don't know if winner is the right word. It's definitely a lot to go through to achieve that award. But your respect from the moment I knew you were a Toronto Maple Leaf was immediate from my end, because I hadn't accomplished anything in this game, just yet. And we first sort of met over you're probably your most, famous baby right now in Smashfest. Like I couldn't wait to go, and I couldn't believe when I showed up. Is it still at Steam Whistle?
Yes.
When you're back? So we'll talk about that. But
yeah.
What an event Smashfest is. And, I think a good place to start would be, of all I won't list off, I'll do it in the introduction, but I won't list off everywhere you played. But
please don't.
Whether it was, we usually record an hour, so that'll take up. We only have like 30 minutes left to talk. But, you're definitely someone, when I think I've been through a lot in my career, it's very humbling when I remember, all that you've excelled through. So, sort of the initial question I wanted to start off with was, how did you excel in the face that all your, career had to offer? Because on one hand, playing for a lot of teams in the different trades can take an emotional toll. It's a lot, but it also means you were highly valued come playoff time. And that's a special compliment in there where it spoke to your versatility. So how, we were talking about in the pre-show, you showed up first on the for the podcast today. Like, I just consider you a consummate professional every day. And I was with you all the way through what would have been what is your last year in the NHL. And there was no flickering of the work ethic, day in, day out. Didn't matter what we were doing. You wanted to win. How did you build that resolve, either growing up or earlier in your career before we met?
Yeah. Well, so first of all, I want to touch on what you talked about originally, which is the first time we came into contact with each other. And you made just as strong as an impression as you're describing. I have, Eric Epstein from the NHLPA who helps me put together Smashfest. He had reached out to invite you to the event, and you were, I had just joined the Leafs, and you were a young guy still making his way into the league, and you immediately replied with enthusiasm and excitement, and actually asked if and how you could make a donation, and Eric kind of relayed that message to me, and I was like blown away by the generosity, blown away by the maturity and enthusiasm, and I couldn't wait to meet you in person, and obviously all those attributes came more to the fore the more I met you. So just wanted to relay that, and kudos to you also on this project that you've endeavored on. I think starting your own podcast was a bold thing to do in a culture that isn't always as receptive to putting yourself out there. But I think also the genuineness of which you go about your business and the kind of personality you are has helped make this really well received and a positive thing. And you have the support of your teammates and those who know you. And I think you're only growing that support by being yourself. So great job. In terms of your first question, it's a tough one to put in a nutshell. I think, growing up as the youngest of, a competitive house of three brothers makes you pretty resilient. We used to play tackle football on the pavement of our street in front of the house. And, I was always the smallest. And so you kind of learn to not take no for an answer. And, that's the only way to survive. So there's that element of development there. I think just always been a competitive person, no matter what activity I'm in, whether it's, nerdy pursuits like Scrabble or, the highest levels of hockey, it's pretty much the same. And I think there's always been an understanding that adversity is what builds character. At the end of the day, you want adversity if you want to grow as a person. You've had your fair share, and I think you're seeing that it makes you stronger. Obviously, it's how you respond. Everyone will face adversity. It's how you respond to it that actually is the building part. And so, in terms of my career, I would have loved to have been drafted and stayed with one team my entire career. That's the personality I have. In terms of making friends and getting to know teammates, I think sometimes it takes me a while to kind of get into that kind of trust tree. You break through the superficial and get to know guys on a deeper level. And so actually it was harder for me to kind of go, on a yearly basis at the deadline to a different team and try to start from scratch. So I wouldn't have chosen that path. But, looking back on it, I'm also very grateful for all of the opportunities to meet the different personalities and teammates that I did along the way. And, at a certain point, I knew at least three guys literally on every team in the league. And that's a positive thing. And that's something I'm grateful for. So, that's a kind of a beginning of an answer, but it's obviously a complex question.
Well, that, what I think is really cool about your answer is, you're not just slapping positivity on all your problems. Like, you're not ignoring the difficulty. There is difficulty socially, when you get traded. I've gone through it. I'm a bit of a nerd. Like, I'm an odd guy. I want the equipment guys to like me. I know I can drive them nuts sometimes when I'm, ask them to change steel profiles and, I don't like this stick. And so they give me the same one. And I'm like, yeah, that's the right one. And it was, I think positivity for me, similar to you and kind of how you phrase it there, is not being ignorant or pretending the negative doesn't exist, but acknowledging it's there. And then on the other side of the coin, choosing to see, what's good about this. Like, of all the guys I've played with, I think you had, and I think you'll nod to John Michael Lyles if I got this right. You have, one of the best restaurant recommendation books that I've ever played with on the road in terms of where to go to eat, and part of that's because you were around a long time, but you also called a lot of places home. So it's like, there is this very obviously negative side. I wanted to have Nick Lidstrom's career. You wanted to have Nick Lidstrom's career. Drafted, play for 86 years on the same team, make the playoffs every season, win a couple cups. But it's not, hockey's a tough game. It's a tough business. And I have a lot of appreciation for the way that you acknowledge the negative. Like, there's a sense of realism there. And then choosing to pursue and pay attention to the positive, really.
Yeah. First of all, I got to give full credit to John Michael Lyles. He is the master of restaurant recommendations. The guy.
One of my favorite D-men growing. Like, I used to. That was my exercise as a kid. To cut you off, sorry. I used to okay. You know how I don't know if you'll relate to this, but we both played in Toronto. You longer than I did. But one of the things that like Canadians do when you're talking about somebody, you say it's an actor or a chef, they'll be like, he's a Canadian. Actually, did you know that? Right? Because, they're proud of, well, that's how Americans go through hockey. I'd be like, oh, but he's an American. So like, I was a huge John Michael Lyles fan, because I would just sit there, watching a game on TV with my computer, with my laptop. And if there was a player like under 6 feet tall, I would like Google, where'd they play? He went to Shattuck. He played at Michigan State. And
it's very
John Michael
true.
Lyles playing as long as he did I was a big fan of his.
It's very true. You put that perfectly. Obviously, the Canadians all know, the Celine Dion's and the Michael Bublé's of, and like to claim them. And it gets annoying, I think, obviously, to Americans. As a Canadian, though, I'm one of the people that do that. But it's obviously the reverse in the sport of hockey. So, but yeah, John Michael Lyles definitely, he had it down. He found some of the best gems, hole in the wall places that we would go. And it was a lot of fun to spend a year with him in Boston and pick up on some of these secrets. But in terms of your other question about acknowledging, realism and things like that. I think I've always felt like optimism is a unbelievable quality to have as a person, but that doesn't mean that you're blind. I think optimism is empowered when you recognize the situation and assess it accurately. And when you talk about personal growth, which I know is a big part of your message here with what you're doing with the podcast, I think personal growth comes from awareness, self-awareness, awareness of environment, awareness of your situation. And that's part of where that realism comes in. You have to kind of see things for what they are in order to learn how to deal with them. And if you don't acknowledge problems, I guess you can't expect to fix them, or you can't expect to face challenges if you don't, look at it that way.
Yeah, I like that. So when you think back to your career, because I look up to you in a lot of ways, I think there's great value in, number one, talking to players who've been where you want to go. I mean, 1,000 games is a number that keeps me up at night. Like it gives me butterflies when I am able to think of being able to stay in the league that long. But what drove you year in and year out? So when I think of myself, there's like certain words that I ascribe to. I consider myself very curious person. I consider myself very competitive. Those are two great, drivers for me. On the darker side, I have some jealous tendencies. Like when I was a kid and someone else had ice time, I wanted what they had. I remember when.
Do we have to ask Lexi about that one too, or?
She is. I just don't ask. Hey, did anyone send you a drink tonight? I just, let her have the free drink at dinner or whatever. And yeah, I think I'm happy with what we got there. But so like when I think of it's unique to each person. But what drove you year in and year out, and what led to the professionalism? Like what was the sausage making process behind the consistency and the drive that I saw in your last year in the NHL?
I guess in a nutshell, it's the drive to get better. And no matter what I do, I want to improve every day, try and get better at whatever it is. And, it's again, back to that growth thing. I think that's, life is growth. And, as a hockey player, that was my mentality, is to try and get better every single day. And then, if you do that, you don't really have to worry about where you are or where you're going. It kind of takes care of itself. Obviously it takes a tremendous amount of discipline to follow that through. But, that was what, became my mentality. And when you think about things like face-offs and, you're talking about the details of the game, those are the things that you start to, if you're improving in incremental ways on a daily, weekly, monthly, those things try to add up. And I had always had the attitude that I wanted to be as complete a player as I could be. That was what I was going to bring to the team. And the drive to win as a team and have success as a team and play your part in the whole, playing your role, playing your part in the whole, and helping bring that success all comes down to these little things. And so that was kind of what, got me up and got me to work every day.
What was something, versus the beginning of your career, towards the prime, towards the end, that you didn't have naturally as a part of your game? So when I think, growing up, for example, I was a very offensive minded D-man. There was no rush I didn't want to be a part of. There was no rush. I didn't try to lead. But like as I came into all the way up even to pro hockey, because I played that way, through junior in the OHL, like I didn't skate backwards much. Like I struggled as a D-man coming into pro hockey, skating backwards at all. And so it was like this big project of mine. I'm like, oh my God. Like when I watch, Matt Niskanen skate backwards, and the way, Brooks Orpik and some of the, better backwards skaters that were around, when I was a young pro, it was like a huge project of mine that now, I think my gap skating, my shuffles, my ability to not cross over, my ability to cross over if I want to, it's at a much better clip than it was. What is something specifically in your game that really was a project of yours that you were proud of that came around?
It's a great question. I mean, I don't know if I could single out one thing. I do think that, I was an offensive player in college. I was first team All-American as an offensive player. But coming into the NHL with the Rangers, Eric Lindros was, this was pre-salary cap. Eric Lindros was the fourth line center for the Rangers.
Oof,
and so
luck.
If I was going to make that team, I had to do something right. And, it wasn't going to be that they were going to rely on me for scoring. And so, in order to make my way and find a role on that team and in the league, I had to do other things. And I ended up finding a role as a penalty killer. I think my speed and the reads I could make on that helped me, be a good penalty killer. And then, like I said, my mentality just wanted to be as complete a player as I can. So it's not like I, said, okay, now I'm going to go work on my face-offs. It just came naturally to me that, I wanted to be, if you're going to take faceoffs, you better be good at it. You better be.
yeah. They can get anybody to stand in there. You got to win it.
Yeah, you better be trying to improve, or else what are you doing? So, it wasn't always like looking at it in a specific way in terms of, okay, I'm going to work on this now. It was just kind of like, well, this is what you do, and so I just kind of made my way that way.
Anyone that you particularly like watched on draws, technique wise, that you tried to emulate?
Well, it's funny. I actually give a lot of credit to not someone I ever played with in the NHL, but a guy that I played with in junior hockey. Really changed my perspective in a major way. I played for the Aurora Tigers, north of Toronto, in Tier 2 Junior A. This was before I went to college. And I was just, a kid on the junior team. This guy was a 20-year-old guy. He played in the league. He was an unbelievable player, super smart player. And, I looked up to him, and one day after practice, I just, I asked him to help, give me some thoughts on draws. And it was just a shocking moment for me, because he was talking for like 20 minutes about all these different perspectives on how he's thinking about the draw, and what his opponent's doing, and what his opponent's, bread and butter is, and what his bread and butter is, and, counteracting. I was like, to that point, I'd just gone in there and tried to pick it clean, and, like, what else do you know?
Win, I guess. Yeah. Yeah.
And so it was eye-opening in the sense that, okay, wow, like this is the depth of thinking and focus and knowledge that this guy is bringing to bear on this part of the game. There's a whole layer, many, many layers to peel back on this onion that I've been unawares of. And so Steve Guiney is his name. And I don't, I've mentioned him before in different interviews, but I hope he knows the impact he made on me there.
Do you have his number or anything? Like maybe we'll have to find him, send it.
Yeah.
Come on, it's 2020. He's got to be on social media or something.
Yeah.
We'll find him. When you look back on your career, highlight wise, what are some things that come to mind?
Well, I guess chronologically, I would say, the first playoff run that I ever had with the Montreal Canadiens in 2010. I had gotten traded there before the deadline, shocker. And
spoiler alert.
I grew up in Toronto, so I grew up a Leaf fan. Doug Gilmour was my hero, but I'm a hockey fan and someone that, the history of the game is something that I grew up with and cherished. And so, to walk into the Montreal Canadiens locker room for the first time and see the quote from Flanders Fields on the, it's just jaw dropping. And to be a part of, we made the playoffs on the last day by 1 point. And we came back from 3-1 down against the President's Trophy winners, the Capitals, in the first round. Then we, beat the Penguins, Malkin and Crosby and company in the second round in Game 7. And then, conference finals, the city of Montreal was, rioting in the streets. And when we landed, after upsetting these teams, it was like we were the Beatles. They were banging on our car windows as we left the airport. It was quite the experience. And so that was my first taste of the playoffs. I was a kid that just couldn't wait to have that experience. Obviously, you're playing street hockey. It's always Game 7 as a kid. And so to play in the playoffs was something that I cherished. And moving on, the next year was right back in that situation with the Tampa Bay Lightning. We, first round came back from 3-1 down again against the Penguins to upset them, and then swept the Capitals, and ended up losing to the Bruins in Game 7 of the conference finals, 1-0. And obviously Boston went on to win the Cup that year. And that was as close as I had got to that point. An incredible group of teammates there in Tampa that I got really close with. And then obviously, the Rangers, the teams that we had in New York, special special group there, and 2014, obviously coming back from taking some time away from the game, and we made it all the way to the finals, and I had a role in the conference finals to help us clinch that memorable goal there that stands out as probably the biggest highlight of my career. So I guess I went in order of chronologically, but I think those Ranger years were incredibly memorable.
That Canadiens year, was that when Jarl Halak was just on fire?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah.
I remember that. Yeah, it's hard. Those years that you were talking about, the different playoff runs, like I remember them because I was watching as a fan, but I was still young enough that it was like, I wasn't totally paying attention to any one team. I just put whatever channel on and loved it, So it's cool to hear you talk about how immersed you were and being in Montreal. It is a special place to play. Somewhere I always say when, people ask, where do you like to play on the road? I'm like, Montreal is pretty sick. Like it's just got a unique feel to it. I was debating on asking you, about your leave from the game, because there's got to be, tremendous, pain and difficulty, and I'm sure it's something that a lot of people have the same debate. Do I bring this up or not? And I remember when you won the Masterton Trophy, I just thought, like, man, I remember watching how proud Dominic Moore, when I was watching, how proud he must be of getting through something like that. And you talk about in your speech that perseverance, takes a team. And, being as team-oriented as you always were, what do you remember during that time, and what do you remember pulling from that experience?
So
with Katie at the time.
Yeah, so I think, when I think about that, I do think that more so than pride, it's more so grateful for all the people that helped you get through it. You can't get through something like that yourself. And so there's so many people, obviously family, but your close friends. And then of course my teammates, when I came back, all played a huge role in helping me get back and get through that. And so it's a gratefulness and gratitude actually that is the prevailing emotion there. But it kind of gets back to earlier part of our conversation is that coming back, the mentality that I had and the approach I had to my game was an asset for me when I did come back, because that focus on improvement was what got me through. If I had tried to think about end results, and it would have been too daunting. I was coming back. I hadn't played in a year and a half, so it was going to take that incremental approach because I was nowhere near ready, even when the season started. It took a while and took a lot of support from other people.
Well, and we were talking earlier about not taking something that's negative or difficult in our life and just immediately turning it into a positive just to, wash it down. But, the passing of Katie and what happened with your brother, Steve, with the, concussion and that, it leads to one of the greatest joys, one of the things that I know from talking with you that you're most proud of. And that's where we started this conversation off, was about Smashfest. And I know it's been this beast that has grown exponentially. Like, I couldn't believe the quality of production. Like, I actually, in knowing, people like yourself and people that do, these really cool charitable functions, it was a goal of mine. When I was younger, I was like, oh man, I want to have a stable enough career that I can pick my head up and have like the attention and the desire for people wanting to work with me to launch my own event, a mental health event someday. That's, something I, try to champion. And like I had the doors blown off my expectations when I walked in. Like, I couldn't believe the media involvement, the quality of the food. Like, we had like a Lululemon gift bag. We were at you put us up at the Ritz. Like, yeah, I couldn't believe that a current NHL hockey player had the ability to put something on of this magnitude. And so how did it start? And, what are you most proud of year in, year out? Because it is such an incredible event, that raises money, for two causes that are, super close to your heart. But I know you work very hard at it. And more importantly, I guess, everyone I've ever spoken with oozes about how much fun they had. So, what a gift you're able to give to, everyone who's able to attend.
Yeah. Well, so that's something that I am proud of, is that when I hear players and people come away from the event talking about how it was just so much fun, the best night of the summer and, the best charity event they've been to, we hear people kind of relay their feedback to us that way. That's something that I'm very grateful and proud of. And again, I want to give credit. I mentioned Eric Epstein earlier. Mm-hmm. Devin Smith is another guy at the NHLPA that very early on I went to the NHLPA to ask for their support in this project. And, we didn't know what to expect when we first started. At the time, ping pong events weren't quite as a thing yet that like they are now. My thought was simply that, hey, there was a ping pong table in every NHL locker room. I personally loved to play and had battled Marty St. Louis for hours before and after practice, and I thought it would make a fantastic charity event. Social, it's interactive, anyone can do it. Really showcase the players' personalities. And so we weren't sure how it would be received, but my whole focus was on, okay, whatever we do, I want to make sure that people come away saying that they had a blast. And so year one, that was a simple goal. If everyone comes away saying that they had a blast, then we'll have succeeded, and we'll have room to grow. And again, more sponsors came on board. More collaborators got involved. Obviously, players coming out year after year in huge numbers. Incredibly grateful for that. So obviously, it's something that has taken on a life of its own the last few years, and I'm hoping that we can continue to grow it going forward.
Yeah, so I remember when I was there, I ran into a juggernaut in Jeff Skinner, who's a really strong player, and who was on this guy's team? Like, how did he find? They're like bona fide professional ping pong players out of, I understand there's like some tournament at Lululemon in Toronto or something.
So there's, for those who don't know, Smashfest has two parts to it. One is a pro-am doubles tournament where, let's say there's an NHL team captain on every team. And so Connor Carrick will play with two guests against Jeff Skinner and his two guests in a doubles, best of three sets. And then obviously the second part of the event is where it's a singles tournament with just the NHL players. So you're talking about the doubles part where you face Skins. And Skins, for those who don't know, also is in the summer, he spends 3 nights a week at a local ping pong club training for Smashfest. And he brought a ringer from the club to be on his team in the Pro-Am because he wanted to take the title down. So you ran into a recruited table tennis
athlete. The guy was
athlete.
a bona fide GM of his club. Like I was showing up, I think I decided I was able to come like 2 weeks prior and, just happy. I actually had some good players on my team, so I can't complain, but I ran into this was calculated. Skins knew he had done his homework. I felt I was underprepared.
What's fun is
when
that
I look back on
some of our sponsors now, they, Oxford Property Group is a big commercial real estate company in Toronto. They've been a tremendous supporter. What they do now is they hold their own intercompany tournament to see who's going to be on their team in the Pro-Am. And so they won the event last year, and they had a guy from India, I think, or somewhere that had been a competitive table tennis player as a kid, nationally ranked and whatnot. And so, he took his suit jacket off and all of a sudden
table tennis, for people that don't know, is very, very much like golf, where there's a lot of amateurs. Hey, how are you at ping pong? I'm pretty good. Like I'm pretty good. And then all of a sudden you play with a tour player, someone that, plays competitive, and you're like, I'm totally out to lunch on what I thought my amateur ability was.
Yeah. Well, obviously it's all, 90% fun, 10% competitiveness at Smashfest. But I have had guys, I know for the singles part, Aaron Ekblad came one year and, he said, yeah, I play a lot. I'm, pretty solid and looking forward to it. And when he showed up, he saw Patrick Eves with his little carrying case with his paddle, and, Stefan Veilleux with his, headband and wristbands on. And he was like,
Stefan Veilleux,
I might be a little bit out of my league here.
Yeah, you're in the deep end. And Stefan Veilleux, yeah, I remember him. I used to go, my agency when I was growing up was Octagon, and they would have these camps out in Minnesota, and he would be buzzing around out there in these 5-on-5 scrimmages pre-training camp. But some of the NHLers were there, to get in shape, and Steph very much tried to arrive in shape and was ready to, flex that. So I just remember him being ultra competitive. I was like 15 at the time. We just didn't want to piss him off.
Ultra competitive is a good word for him. And one of the years he actually got up, and he had been the 2-time defending champ, and he got beat by Patrick Eves. And there was a bit of an altercation in the finals that Rajiv Sharma from Killer Spin was our tournament official, had to kind of step in and quell the disturbance.
Full McIntyre
McEnroe, yeah, exactly.
McEnroe, sorry,
it's a bit of a McEnroe
I'm thinking of Steve
situation.
McIntyre.
Yeah,
McEnroe.
Yeah,
that's awesome. My producer Colin's gonna be pissed. I screwed that up. The name.
You can edit that out, can't you?
Yeah. Well, now we might leave it because I think it's charming. Yeah, we might just leave it. But so your hunger for growth, so obvious in your own career, so obvious in how you've taken care of this baby that is Smashfest. So what's COVID? We're still recording, under, Banana Land's circumstance, wild times out here for public events. And so how are you going to carry on the growth of Smashfest moving forward here for the foreseeable, hopefully short-term future, but who knows? I'm curious of how you're going to continue to launch it.
Yeah. So, we're coming up at the end of July, which is normally when Smashfest is held in Toronto. And we had to cancel it a few weeks ago officially. It was kind of expected and a long time coming, but we officially announced that. And when we announced that, we also announced the premiere of our Unveiled by Smashfest TV series, which was something that just kind of came together organically. One of the sponsors that, we gave a ping pong table to a few years ago as a thank you, they, I had seen, a little while later that they had a graffiti artist paint the table. And when I saw it, I was blown away with how cool it was. And then I kind of put 2 and 2 together about, that would be a pretty cool concept for a show with, if you interviewed a player and talked to him about his passions and inspirations and had him think about what he would design on his own table, and then have the graffiti artist bring that vision to life. And so, it's something I had in my mind for a few years now, but then obviously when the quarantine started, production barriers got very low. And so I saw it as an opportunity. Obviously the players are idle, and so I thought I'd just start on it and see where it went, and was able to get the NHL involved as a partner, and they were, fantastic with bringing their resources to bear to help me put it together. And So we did episode 1 that featured our friend and teammate Mitch Marner, as well as Brad Marchand, who's obviously a polarizing figure, but he's a very interesting personality. And having played with him, he's a charismatic and great guy. So that made for a great episode 1. And then we just did episode 2 with your teammate Jack Hughes and his brother Quinn, and
Very cool.
former teammate of mine, Victor Hedman. And so for those who haven't seen it, it's unveiled and it's on the NHL's social media channels, Facebook and YouTube.
What is on? What did Jack contribute? I'm curious to what was part of his.
Jack had a ton of
design
interest.
inspiration.
He was, so he's really into fashion. So he wanted a set of like cool sneakers
Very cool.
on there, and we draped the sneakers over the Statue of Liberty. He's in Jersey City now,
sick.
and
Yeah.
the New York skyline is something that he looks out on from his place, and it came out really awesome. And he had a ton of interest that he and passions that he wanted to see as part of his. And they split it. Jack did the left side of the table, and Quinn did the right, and so they're avid ping pong players in their basement at home against each other, and their little brother Luke as well. So they're going to have that table to battle on in the basement.
Yeah, that's sick. I didn't know that Jack was involved with that. That's cool. You said it there was sneakers, and I want to stay on this hunger for growth topic, but I got a text when quarantine was really locked down. The world was very much on pause. All these players you mentioned were very idle. I was one of them, and you texted me and said, hey Connor, what's up? What are you doing next? Whatever it was, Tuesday, and you offered this class, via the Harvard School of Business. Anita Elbersay offered up some of her time to do this like collaborative case study weekly class featuring. There were some NHLers on there, and there were some pro tennis players, which I know you are, a huge tennis fan. How did you make that happen? Whose idea was that, and who had to pull what weight?
Yeah. So basically, when the quarantine started, as someone that recently retired, as the quarantine went on, I was thinking about guys like yourself and guys around the league that were kind of at home idle, not really even able to skate or, work out, and thinking about how they must be kind of like feeling what retirement is like. And it probably isn't pretty, for guys that haven't thought about it yet. And so because it was something that's fresh for me, I thought, well, given that they're idle, maybe this is a good time to expose guys to some of the resources out there that can help them prepare for the next phase of life. And, I've been fortunate in my time to have these resources available in the education that I was able to have in college. And so I thought it would be great to be able to share some of that. And so, as you mentioned, I'm a big tennis fan, and I have a lot of friends in the game in that sport. And I talked to a friend of mine who also recently retired, and we've kind of thought about this plan of putting together some virtual classes for the idle athletes. And we approached one of the Harvard Business School professors to see who teaches a sports and entertainment business class, to see if she would be willing to do this free. And you mentioned Anita. She was super enthusiastic and positive about it right from the get-go. And so literally 2 weeks later, she said, this is case study number 1, and it's about LeBron James, and spread the word. So that was kind of how it came together. It was a very organic thing. And, we ended up having, I think, over 60 guys not just guys, but athletes from all different sports, male and female, on the first case. And we ended up doing 3 of them before kind of people were getting back to training and skating and things like that. And I think it went really well.
I think so too. I thought the two cases I was a part of was the LeBron James case, in which it was laid out for him the different video gaming options earlier in his career, and I thought it was very cool. Just because I'm a basketball fan, but not, over the top, in terms of my ability to follow week in, week out, especially in season. And I didn't know about the AGF, terminology amongst the Nike elite. That was super cool. They were talking about LeBron James. He was a signed Nike athlete at the time, and they had, given him a bunch of money. I think it was like $90 million at that point earlier in his career. And, the guy that was, kind of on the hook for dishing out the $90 million, there was some snickering like in the hallways and that when he would walk around Nike headquarters until the Game 5 series. Who was it? That was against Detroit, the Detroit Pistons, right? Where he just went off and had, 22 points in the last. And then actually the other case study was called Sneakers, which I thought this one was particularly cool for me. I sent it to Colin, my producer, even, and said, Colin, how can we apply some of the lessons here from, this gamified nature? It discussed this application that Nike had that incentivized and made it fun for their most avid, diehard fans to engage further with the brand, to have access, to earn access in a way that, no one else had if you weren't aware of the app and willing to pay attention and dive into the brand. And it was super cool, just to think of. And I know I love education. I identified, all growing up, I loved going to school. I didn't, finish college, and it was something that, I really identified as someone who I enjoyed being a lifelong learner. And it was part of the transition into wanting to do this podcast was I don't want to put that part of me on hold all the way until retirement. Because then I think it's just so hard. There's so much inertia. There's so much life change on going there. And starting this podcast actually helped me, I felt, in the class. Because you know how hockey culture is, Anita would ask a question. Hey, what do we think about, LeBron's opportunity to, sign a video game deal with EA Sports versus 2K? And no one's kind of raising their hand. The tennis players, all with a very, individual based nature to their sport, were a little bit more comfortable in commenting and come up with their thoughts. So I'm sitting there and I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, well, if you want to think, Connor, that you're worthwhile to listen to, if you want to be comfortable with judgment, you're going to have to be as a hopefully successful podcast host, you got to raise your hand, dude. You got to, especially in front of your peers. You don't think game one, someone's going to come back and chirp the podcast mid game. It's coming. And I was like, don't bury your head in the sand and pretend that's not coming. So,
and you'll recall that I gave you props for, getting in there and making yourself heard in the class. And, the case method relies on participation. It relies on people talking through, sharing their perspectives on the case. It's a very practical way to learn about business. And without people putting in their 2 cents, it can't progress at all. And so I was proud of you for stepping in and leading the charge on the hockey guys. But the cool thing was that over the course of, the next few sessions, by the last one, there were 7 or 8 of the hockey guys, even though there was over 20 on, that were involved, that were all participating and getting involved and not afraid to share their views. And part of it was the comfort level of that. And also I think they were gaining confidence that not being intimidated by it. And it was awesome to see.
Yeah. And I mean, another experience I think I drew from was much like yourself socially. I've been traded, you've been traded. It can be a lot, especially when you're breaking into a new room. Feeling comfortable and accepted around your teammates is a big part of playing well. And it was something that I realized, early in the trading process, I guess. When I exuded nervousness, when I was anxious socially, it made other people uncomfortable to be around me. I could smell it. It just made this whole encounter hard for people. So I just decided, I'm like, you know what? It was after the Dallas trade when I got traded to New Jersey. It was really when I figured it out, because Dallas was a little bit of an older room, historically strong team and a lot of guys from a lot of different backgrounds. So, I was still a little nervous. And then when I got to Jersey, I'm like, you know what? I'm over it. Like, I'm just going to present who I am. They're going to find out I'm weird eventually anyway. Like, this is no secret. So we'll just, hey, what's up? This is how I am. And
be yourself.
I felt it. Be myself.
Best advice you can ever give.
Yeah. And I it was such a reward for me. Like, I made friends so much faster post deadline, my first year there. That even coming into the second season, like I was talking to, I think it was Kevin Rooney and Mackenzie Blackwood one day at lunch, and they're like, "Oh my God, this is only your first full year here. I feel like you've been here forever." I'm like, I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing.
That's
but
great.
It was a little clunky at first, but the personal growth, I think, you got to put the reps in, and if it's uncomfortable, that usually means you're on a good track. Like the night I announced the podcast, I didn't even have it recorded yet. I'm like, I think I want to throw up. I just picture, Lou Lamoriello, who was always great to me, but I just picture him, who does this kid, think he is, kind of thing. I actually saw Lou was on Cam Jansen's podcast recently. So, maybe Lou's open to, a little bit more open-minded to this stuff.
I think during the quarantine, there's no sports on TV. I think the need for content was high, and I think you saw players that they're not kind of in the locker room setting, and so they started engaging with the fans in a pretty organic, natural way, and I think you started to see guys come out of their shell. I'm hoping that this is a turning point for the game. And I think everyone was supportive of, the ways that guys express themselves throughout the quarantine. And so hopefully that'll continue.
Yeah, I was joking that there's going to be like a lot of looking for quarters in the interviews after quarantine. Like, so Connor, please explain your TikTok choreography on, June 3rd. I'm like, no comment.
Just took it one
there's
game
going to
at
be
a time.
It's gonna be a whole lot of thumb twiddling in some of these interviews. But yeah, just take it one game at. Well, we were just trying to get the puck in deep, whatever. So a lot of this podcast, we spent time about, what you've done and what you're proud of in the past, and you certainly have so much to be proud of. But I know now with your wife, Mary, you have a daughter now. What is next in your world? Like, what are you dreaming of next? How is retirement going? And somewhere in there, if you got any advice for, us who know that day is coming and, pretend it isn't, what thoughts do you have?
Yeah, well, hopefully there's many more years for you in the league. And like you said, you're preparing for that by getting engaged in other things. And I think that's awesome. Some people don't know that after my year in Toronto, my last year in the NHL, I went to play for Team Canada at the Spengler Cup at Christmas, and then stayed to play in Switzerland for the second half of that season. And that was an incredible experience, I have to say, for anyone, guys that are, getting towards the end of their career and they're looking at their options. I would definitely encourage guys to consider playing abroad. It's just an amazing chance to experience a different culture, and obviously you can't play the game forever. And a chance to continue to do that while enjoying travel and things like that. I would definitely advise guys to think about that end up in a situation similar to the one I was in. Yeah, and then since then, kind of deliberately, me and my wife decided to take some time to enjoy being at home with our baby. It's a special time that I think you can't get back, those first half a year or whatever it is. And to be honest, the quarantine has been, tough for a lot of people, but for us with the newborn, it's kind of been a good time to just appreciate and cherish those moments. And in terms of what next, I'm kind of sorting through and trying to figure out, what different paths I might take. But obviously Smashfest will still continue to be a major focus of mine, and we'll see what else.
Well, maybe that question was a little big, but because I'm really curious about your time in Switzerland. I've joked about on the podcast even here, where like I am totally committed to just playing my offside and trying to hammer one timers like in the German league or whatever. Like I want to play forward for a year somewhere out there. So, in terms of what you've learned in quarantine, about you, your family, your wife, and your time in Switzerland, just the cultural differences. What are some things like even just in your home that you're trying to bring up? So like, for example, I'm struggling with it a little bit right now in that when I was sitting at home at the beginning of quarantine, there was no missing out. Everybody was chilling. There was nothing going on. And I enjoyed the stillness because I'm, can be a busy bee. I'm addicted at times to busy. If I've got an open slot, okay, I got to call a friend and make sure I have something scheduled, or I got to, call this guy, call that guy. And I'll take great pride in how scheduled I am. And then, during quarantine, I really enjoyed the flow of the day. Like, yes, I still tended to some routine in the morning, would train, but things were just a little slower, And now there's a challenge to like remember that I liked that, and you have to purposefully facilitate it now because normal is starting to come back, and there's some elements of normal, that I'm willing to reject, that I'm willing to edit and cut, So in terms of just the home life, what are some things you learned over in Switzerland, on the back end of the Spangler Cup, and in COVID times?
Yeah, I think, in Switzerland, it's just a really amazing experience to live in Europe, live in Zurich. I mean, we lived in the biggest city in Switzerland, 10 minutes from the airport. It was cool to see the different league and the players there and get a perspective on that. I'd spent, obviously 15 years of professional hockey in North America, and I think it was really neat to see the professionals in the other leagues and what they're doing. But also, I have an appreciation for travel and for Europe, and we got to, we had a day off. You could go to Italy for 24 hours, or after the season, we went to Spain and kind of toured around Spain. And you can't do, it's a 30-minute flight. You can't do that in North America. No. It's a commitment to go to Europe. So we knew that life was potentially changing when we got back with starting a family, and so we wanted to embrace and fully make the most of that opportunity, which we did. So no regrets, and that was a great experience. And then coming back, for those who have kids, they know that there's no schedule when it comes to newborns. They run your show, but she's almost 5 months now, so she's starting to get into a little bit more of a routine. And in terms of advice for quarantine, obviously everyone's situation is different. I'd say, it's nice to have the flexibility and freedom. Some people are more self-starters than others and can thrive in that environment. I think there should be a self-awareness, though, if that's you or not. And if it's not, try to find ways to help yourself excel by adding some structure in some way, whatever that is. And try to take advantage of the freedom and flexibility that you have in terms of pursuing new things or engaging in opportunities that you might not have otherwise.
Anyone you've particularly leaned on in that process? Like, I know, the Harvard alumni is a strong, background, part of, your hockey career. I know Marty St. Louis was a friend that you said you went to war with, in ping pong. What's he in now? He's in finance now of some capacity, isn't he?
He's mostly coaching his kids in youth hockey.
Oh, cool.
He is involved in a kind of a bit of a venture capital operation, but he mostly spends his time coaching youth hockey, and he is super. He loves it, absolutely loves it. I think. I have a lot of people that I rely on for friends and mentors that I rely on for guidance and advice. And I would encourage anyone that obviously is in that transition mode to when in doubt, call someone and get their thoughts. People really enjoy sharing their experience and their knowledge, and are happy to give it. And you just always learn a lot by hearing a perspective that you might not have otherwise. So I've relied on, a lot of people throughout this process, and will continue to do that.
Yeah, because I think that's really what I was after, partly when starting the podcast, was like, I don't need to, necessarily. I'm not looking for anything totally specific, whether it was revenue or I definitely want to meet this person or that person, but I wanted to. I know there's a certain leverage as a current player of when you pick up the phone and call somebody. People are receptive to, they want to talk to a current NHLer. There's cool stories to be had. There's a level of access there that, you can provide as a friend. That's part of my goal, was just to meet people and talk with people who are doing things in the world that I want to do. Maybe not now, but whether they're in the business world, the wellness space, whatever, I wanted to, gain some friends and make use of the attention that being a current player could have,
Yeah. Obviously that's a very smart thing to do. And, it broadens your horizons, it broadens your network, and expands your ideas of what's possible and what you might get into. Again, it doesn't mean that it's taking you away from your day job, because, you're still focused on that as your primary activity, but, it is giving you other things to think about. And, for me, that when I was playing, having Smashfest and having my foundation to focus on was great. Like I was used to being a student athlete and, having classes and then going to practice. And so it helped me actually to have other things, because then I was fresh when I came back to hockey, versus if you just, and this was something I talked about with Brad Marchand in our Smashfest Unveiled. If you have other things that you're into, it helps you change the channel. And if you're just thinking about hockey all day, every day, you're going to burn out, and, it's going to get to you. And especially in the high pressure environment that we live in, high stakes environment, I think it's a helpful thing to have other pursuits, as long as you maintain your primary focus on the task at hand.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thanks, Dom. I totally get it, man. Trying to practice sustainability. It's a long season. It's hard year in, year out. But congratulations. Like, you did it, and you have so much to be proud of in your career. I know my career, was better having, the opportunity to play with you. Learned a lot from you, still do, trying to steal, an extra hour on a Saturday morning and, of your time. So I appreciate it. But how can people find you and further support Smashfest after this podcast? Yeah,
well, first of all, thanks for having me on. I'm really proud of you, and I think it's awesome what you're doing, sharing this. And I hope it continues to grow. And yeah, I think smashfest.ca is where all things Smashfest live, including our latest project with Unveiled. And I think that's about it for now. I got to get this podcast big and massive, so I guess there's a market for my ping pong table, because I'm already picturing it. There's the microphone for CC Pod, and then I've got the big Chemex on there with the pour over, maybe a picture like me and John Jeller from our days with the Leafs making it. Now I got the creative juices flowing, but admittedly, I don't take it personally. You haven't asked me yet. I understand point totals wise, and that Mitchie and Marchand, and I guess the Hughes brothers and Victor. We're only 2 episodes in, so don't take it personally. Yeah, I get it. It's all right. and from everything I've heard, I'm thanks for your time today. I'm going to bug you about connecting with John Michael Lyles, because you're not the first guy that has told me what an interesting character he is. I'd love to talk with him. He uses Eater, and then he cross-references that with Yelp, and then he probably has a third website that he looks at pictures, of the food on the plates. And so when exactly what we're getting into when we step into the restaurant. I'll have to call you before I
podcast with him when we get to, and have you do some of my homework for me, what I got to ask him about. Any tennis players you think would be good on here? Because I love, we've had a rower on, Marty McBean. We had an ultra marathoner in Zach Bitter. That was, two really cool podcasts. I'm trying to build out, and Colin, we joked about it when we were trying to set this podcast up. He's a huge tennis fan. So at some point I would love to, and just such an individual sport, right? Like it's such an artful sport. There's such a mental component. I think one of my favorite sport books of all time was Andre Agassi's book, Open.
Mm-hmm.
Fascinating read. So I think there's some super cool stories, over in that sport. But anyone you think would be a good fit?
Yeah, there's a few guys that could probably be a really good fit. I mean, obviously, I think, given the nature of the things that you want to share and the knowledge that you want to put out there, there's a few guys that I think fit into that mold. Marty Fish is a guy that, dealt with a lot of anxiety in his career and actually kind of came out with it, which was a big and brave step on his part. He recently won the Lake Tahoe Celebrity Golf event, which there's some serious players there. So he would be a really interesting guy to talk to. I actually personally don't know him, but I could probably help get in touch with him. I think he would be a good fit.
That'd be cool. Dominic, thanks for your time, man. Have a great rest of your day. This was awesome. I think your story will help a lot of people, definitely young players, young professionals across, any industry. Good for you, and don't be a stranger, man. Look forward to checking in with you soon, and all the best with the Unveiled series.
Thanks, man. I really appreciate it, and thanks for letting me be a part of this.
Absolutely. Thanks for the tire pump too. We'll have to clip that up about how this was all, not anti, but kind of in contrast to hockey culture, because it is changing. I felt it. I saw it during quarantine. A lot of people were still at home and, couldn't think about, where to be in the 2-1-2 tomorrow night. And, were able to pick their head up and express themselves some other ways. So it's been fun.
Be in the 2-1-2, yes.
Which is important. I think about where I need to be in the 2-1-2 a lot. And sometimes too much when I wasn't where I needed to be. And then this is that resiliency thing we're trying to discuss and facilitate.
As you said, the best teams, are the ones where everyone can be themselves and fit together within that. So I think I think it is changing, and we'll see where it goes.
That's it. Thanks, man. Thank you everyone for joining us today. Thank you, Dom, for an hour of your time this Saturday morning here as we record. There were 3 points that really stood out for me with Dominic, definitely when I played with him, but it's really cool and clear when you're able to ask someone at length that you're able to during a podcast in terms of how he built this, how he built his career, how he built himself. And one was when he discusses mindset, growth mindset. He, particularly when he took his leave of absence from the game of hockey, I can only imagine how daunting that process was, how emotional the time off, really was for him in the middle of his career. But he discusses at length about how to trust the process and make digestible goals out of something that is so daunting. And that was the word that he used when he discussed his comeback. And I think there was also, he didn't use this word, but it was something that I took from it, whereas he had great grace with himself, it sounds, in that process. He understood that even as training camp was coming around, even as the regular season was starting, there was going to be a growth process. I think he was respectful of just how hard it is to be your best day in, day out when you have access to a normal schedule, when you have access to unlimited ice time and just staying in the routine of being an everyday NHL player. And you can't totally replicate it without having access to that. So I think the grace that he had with himself in that process is something that, I want to implement into my own life. He also had a quote that you want adversity if you want to grow as a person. And I said that, I think it was in the Kevin Rooney podcast, where he said something along the lines of adversity is an opportunity to earn respect. And it was cool to hear Dom echo that, because he is a player that has earned every single game. You know, he had some big years in the NHL. I think 41 points was his career year. So he wasn't a player, you know, that was just able to score his way through the league. He had to grind every step of the way. And then he, of course, had, you know, some personal life circumstances that they made things massively more challenging. And this league is quick to forget about players. It's quick to move on and find ways to improve its lineup. That's the nature of pro sport. That's the nature of the National Hockey League. That's what makes it so competitive and such a special place to play. But I thought that particular quote was interesting, you know, out of Dom. And then finally, one of the things that didn't necessarily come up in our conversation today, but that I witnessed in going to war with Dom day in, day out as a teammate, was he is an everydayer. He would work hard all the time. He had great personal discipline, clearly in his personal life, to be able to show up with energy every day. But he also had a very strong mental game where no matter what was going on, you know, where he was in the lineup, if he was in, if he was out, he was consistent. The Toronto Maple Leafs always knew what they were getting out of him. These other clubs that, you know, had looked to acquire him at trade deadlines knew what they were getting out of him moving into different playoff series that they were, and, you know, kind of strengthening their team any way they could. Dominic Moore is a consummate professional. He is detailed beyond belief. I think there's so many lessons and just keys to success that, you know, he really gifted us today. I got to witness it as a teammate, but I wasn't along the ride for his entire career. So it was really special to share our time together and really catch up with an old teammate. Dom, thanks again for setting up those Harvard Business School classes. Those were a great learning tool for me earlier during COVID. And thanks for your time, man. I appreciate it. To all our listeners, thank you for your time today. Thank you for spending an hour with Dominic and I. Please feel free to like, subscribe, share, send to a teammate, mom, dad, or a friend of yours that you think could benefit from listening to, you know, Dominic's story. And I look forward to doing this all again next week as we all join each other together on our journey to be a more curious competitor.